Hello, Michael Carter. Kind of excited here. I got a cool testimony. I'm going to be reacting to this video. This lady has was pulled out of pranic healing as well. That's the same exact cult that I was in. The reason I'm excited is I've been trying to find other testimonies of people that have been pulled out of that same cult, that were saved out of that same cult. She was in pranic healing for a lot longer than I was. She explains a lot of the stuff that I've been preaching to you guys about the way the healings work and how there's a cost to them and everything. So we'll kind of go in and just let her tell her story. She does a phenomenal job telling the story of what it is, how she got into it. Let's take a watch here.
Well, I know that Lyme had something to do with pranic healing, and I want to go into that part of your life. I personally am not familiar with pranic healing, and so can you explain how you were introduced to that in the first place? And then, maybe we can go into what that is and how it works.
Sure. So pranic healing was something I was introduced to at the end of my kind of maybe 5-year travel journey to India and Peru and Mexico and all these places seeking spiritual experiences. And it was after I had my son. He was young, maybe 6 years old, or sorry, 1 year old. And I was having just really intense back pain. And I went and got an MRI and found out I had a bulging disc in my L3-4 lumbar. And I couldn't drive. I had a hard time walking, but I was only 25 years old. So I just was like, wow, what can we do? And I tried like acupuncture, all these different things. And they're like, well, pretty much you can take this like pain medication for the rest of your life, or you can get surgery. But the thought of like having surgery at 25 for my back, I didn't want to do it. And so I started searching, and I just felt like there's got to be more than these like Western medicine dead ends that seem barbaric. They just start cutting into you. Like, I know. And so I started searching and I found a modality called pranic healing that basically said that, the description I found was like it uses energy, or what they call ki or chi, to help the body naturally heal on its own. And I was like, great, I'm going to try this out. So I
Just real quick, that key energy that they call that universal energy. What that really is, when you get deeper into it, is the Kundalini energy, the Kundalini serpent energy. So they don't tell you that at the beginning when you first get in there, but once you get in, you know what that is. That's Kundalini energy. So I just wanted to bring that forward.
went for a weekend workshop, Pranic Healing Level 1, and I kind of got, you can say, initiated into the practice. I learned the modality, and after that weekend, I went home and I started practicing on myself. And basically, you learn a specific technique to project energy into the body, specific types of energy. In this case, I had a bulging disc. And when you have a bulging disc, the fibrous ring around the disc is almost kind of loose. And so we would project a specific type of energy that firmed the disc and contracted the disc off of the nerve. And lo and behold, all this pain I was in was suddenly gone. And so I was like, wow, so you can just manipulate energy and then there's miracles and you're healed. And I was like, sold. I'm a results lady. I want to see where the rubber meets the road. I want to see the results. And when
I just want to tell you guys that is how obviously I didn't know what I was into. I thought I was helping people. But when I was into this, they would have us go up front and pray with people that had back pain. That's telling you a lot of times these are demons just associated with this back pain. She's going to explain this. I tell you guys this a lot. I tell you guys that in energy healing and these fake healing modalities, these ones that are not Christ-centered, they're having the demon back off and then they load something worse in there. They load something worse in. I seen it time after time, and it was revealed to me after I pulled out of there how some of these people were just getting worse and worse. They thought they were better because they didn't have any back pain anymore. That demon just backed off, but now they got cataracts, or now they got, cancer, or they got this or that. So it's like an exchange. She kind of goes over that.
When I got results, I was like, I'm in. This is awesome. They teach you how to tithe. They teach you how to develop your character. They teach you how to be a good person. They teach you how to do forgiveness. I'm like, this is awesome. Like, I found my path finally.
Yeah, because you had been seeking for a long time. You talked about all these.
And that's one other thing too that's kind of it's deceiving in a way, because they were teaching a lot of the same principles as Christianity. That you had to forgive people, that you had to, tithing's good, all these things are good, being a good person's good, all these things, but um, it was a deception the whole way. They would use these Christian terminology. They would strip these scriptures right out of context, and they would put their own meanings into it. But yeah, you can see, as you can see, it seemed like it could help you, right? So
different things. You kind of seeking God and going to all these different gods, and so it really did seem like you were seeking for something more, and you felt like you found it in pranic healing.
I did. And what was so amazing is so they have the healing modality you can learn, but then they have something called arhatic yoga, which is the spiritual teaching that is the umbrella for the healing modality. And so once you become a healer, a pranic healer, then you usually start studying arhatic yoga, which is a very very specific, intense spiritual path with austerities and practices to help you progress. So I started doing that. And that, like I mentioned, this amazing things, character development, loving kindness, non-injury. I just started learning and developing my character, which was awesome. And
she doesn't go into it much with arhatic, but you're literally trying to become a god. They would say like you can come back as an avatar, like a Krishna or a Buddha or a Christ. Remember, the Christ is different than ours. Christ is like an ascended master in the New Age. So that's what you were learning in arhatic yoga. I went through arhatic yoga too. Remember, the hook is the back pain or whatever it is to get you hooked into pranic healing. Anything to get you hooked in, and then it's at this higher cost of, they'll load these worst, sicknesses in because they hate you, but then they pull you into something far more sinister. And she's going to kind of go into that. I mean, the beginning of the whole premise of this testimony is that she baptized herself into like Shiva, into some river that was said to have Shiva's energy in it, and Shiva entered into her and all this stuff. So she went through an intense battle after this, but I just wanted to focus in on this pranic healing stuff.
is they were inclusive. It's like you didn't have to have one specific god or anything. They just taught spirituality and character development, all these kind of awesome virtue on how to be a good human. And I love that. And it really helped me grow as a person.
So it's interesting because compared to all other kinds of healings that I know, this is a fundamentally spiritual practice. Do you need to get any kind of courses or certification or something like that to be a pranic healer, or can anyone just start up their own thing and start doing that?
So yes, it's very rigorous. In order to become a certified pranic healer, which I did do, it took 2 years, and you have to have, I think, 25 you have to have 25 successful, what they call psychotherapy cases, where you basically had someone who had some sort of mental illness or things going on, or depression, and that you use the modality to heal them of it or improve it by 80%.
I want to quickly go over something that's very, very important in this. Because these are all demons working with other demons, the guy that is the head of all this, his name is Stephen Coe. He's out of they're out of California, like Chino, California or something, Chino Hills or something, California, right by Anaheim. But I went out there for a retreat one time. But what he told his testimony of how the guru that which was over this, which was Choa Koksui, laid hands on his daughter who had autism, and the autism demon, so showing you that that autism demon pulled back, and then she got healed, and then that's when he gave his life into this pranic healing stuff. So that's what ends up happening. They'll pull back on certain things. She did 25 successful uh, psychotherapy. I took all those courses too, psychotherapy courses where you would just go after um, these spirits, or they wouldn't even call them spirits, but just anything that's attacking these chakras and stuff like that. But obviously, that the demons are just they're pulling back to get them deeper entrenched into this thing. So there's a lot of cat and mouse stuff, playing with you, pretending like, yeah, you're getting healed, yay, everybody's clapping around, but it's not. It's there's nothing long term. Um, if you get out of everything, that stuff's gonna come right back. All that's, and then plus you've already got the other stuff, but you've already committed your life to a cult. You know, that's the hook. They hook you into this arhatic yoga, and they tell you that you're in the lineage of Buddha, and and you're really a Buddhist and all these things. It's a huge, huge deception.
And then you have to have 50 what they call advanced healing cases that were successful and documented. So basically, broken bone healed in half the time, open wound that sealed, um, all kinds of different diseases that there's these intense protocols to do to basically heal their body through this modality.
So you did all these, you became certified. So how many people did you successfully treat doing that?
Well, basically, I don't remember the amounts, if it was 25-25 or 50-25, but in order to do that, I had to have all those documented, which I did. And I was a pranic healing practitioner for many years. So I had a lot of clientele and people that I worked with, and I saw miracles all the time, back healed right there. Just part of what I did was the results.
And I talked about other kinds of healings, a few
Mhm.
minutes ago.
Mhm.
Going back to that, most of the forms of healing that I know have side effects. Is there anything like that you experience when it comes to pranic healing?
So at the time, no. It just seems like, wow, this is a miracle. Wow, it's amazing. But then something else would show up. So it was just exchanging. It wasn't true healing. Because, like, you start healing this thing, it's like, wow, the back's healed. But then you have this other problem pop up. And I started seeing this with
That's
I had
exactly
started
what it
seeing that with
was.
all my clients. It's like, wait, what's really going on here? Is that we're playing whack-a-mole. And so you might be thinking you're healing something, but there's an exchange that happened in the spirit world that you don't even know the repercussions of. It's like, I started out with a back problem, and then I got severe neurological Lyme's disease. So it really made me wonder, what did I exchange when I started doing that?
So when it comes to your Lyme's disease, it
Mm-hmm.
seemed like it got really bad. You started with the bulging disc, and then, it seemed like whatever the pranic healing transferred that or traded that for Lyme disease. This is kind of the way that you
Maybe.
seem to
Yeah.
explain it. Did What happened with Lyme disease? Did you heal it with that? Did you try? What happened with it?
Well, I definitely worked with it with pranic healing. Not so much that I applied the modalities a lot, but I applied other principles. Like, I'm a strong believer that behind every physical disease is a lot of unforgiveness. So I was really working on unforgiveness, resentment, things like that, which are all part of that modality, which I think it's productive to work on those things. That's the thing with these systems. It's like they have the draw, they have a lot of the truth, but then there's this thing in the back door that you don't realize is not good for you. But I think spiritually and with pranic healing, I didn't find the reprieve that I needed from Lyme's disease. And I went through a lot of intense treatments, first in the United States and eventually down in Mexico. And I got it mostly under control with kind of a physical miracle from a doctor who's a Lyme specialist down in Mexico. And then I was just kind of plateaued at this place of like, okay, I'm not severely sick, but my quality of life wasn't there. I had a lot of pains. I couldn't like walk or run a lot of joint pains, a lot of fatigue, just overall not feeling well, or just the energy that I used to have. So it's like, yeah, maybe 80%, maybe 60 to 80% got healed. And
Here's another thing that happens with these Kundalini spirits is a lot of times they'll slow roll you too. This happens a lot of times in like transferring of spirits. Sometimes they'll slow roll you. She was taking all these spirits in, and now they're slowly manifesting where she was really slow. She was lethargic. She was drained. These spirits were in there. They came in and they were kind of slowly taking her out. So that happens quite a bit too.
I wasn't in crisis, but my quality of life wasn't there.
It's a rough disease. It's not easy. It's better to catch it early, but it's hard to detect, I think, from what I hear. So, I mean, I'm sorry this happened to you. I want to go back to some of the New Age things that you were doing. How many years were you engaged in New Age practices as a whole, and then pranic healing even more specifically? Because we talked about you being introduced to yoga at 18. So how long did that spiritual seeking period of your life last?
And yoga, watch out.
Well, I think officially like a decade, but probably a handful more of years. But I think the apex and intensity of good solid 10 to 13 years of that.
And what happened for all of that to unravel the way that it did? Because today you speak about these things very differently, I imagine, than you would have back then.
Oh yeah.
So there must have been something that happened for you to get to where you are today. So can you talk about that?
Yeah. So I was in a long-term relationship with my now husband, and we had a great relationship, probably the best relationship that either of us have ever had. He was a full-time healing arts practitioner, and so was I. We had our different offices, our different practices. He had a different modality that he practiced called functional symmetry, which is a lot less known than pranic healing. But we would see clients and we would do these healing modalities and work with people, spiritually counsel them. And we had a really good life together. We were living together. We bought a home together, and really like not a lot of complaints. We had what I felt like at the time was a pretty good life. I mean, we had little bumps, but we weren't like big fighters or anything. Just like, oh, this works well. One day I came home from a trip that I took my son on in the Bahamas. I actually took him to a yoga retreat at like 11 in the Bahamas. And I came back, and my boyfriend at the time, who's now my husband, Gabriel, he was acting strange. And that week, actually, he was working at the psychic fair because I'd encouraged him to. It's like, that's where we get a lot of clients from. It's just people searching for spirituality answers. And that was just normal, but he seemed disturbed. And finally I made him dinner and he just wasn't talking much. And I was like, so what's up? And he just kind of looked at me with these glossy eyes and was like,
Glossy
God
eye.
told me to leave you. And I was like, what? What do you mean? Like, it was just, I was in shock. I was like, why? That makes no sense. And I just got so.
One thing with the glossy eyes, that's witchcraft. Witchcraft spirits, sometimes mental illness will show glossy eyes. You'll see it. You see that, that's a spirit manifesting the glossy eyes. Look out for that in deliverance ministry.
Upset that I just left the house crying and I stormed out on the street, and I just remember just the intense emotions, and I was just crying out to God. I was like, God, I don't, is that true? Like, are you telling him to leave me? Like, why would you say that to him? You know? And it was just this like questioning, this, all this certainty that I had and just assumptions I made just started crumbling. And I'm like, what is going on here? Like, and I felt like I heard God, and I felt like God said, through all my stomping around and hours out, just trying to sort through everything, I felt like I heard God, and God said, no matter what happens from this moment on, love him. And I was like, okay, I'll do that. And so I came back in and I saw him, and I was just loving, and I'm like, hey, you know, you don't seem yourself right now. And he had a history of mental illness, and I'd never seen like a break like he had when he was a teenager, but I knew that it was a possibility. And I said, I wonder if you're like, you're having like a mental breakdown or something. And I was staring at him, and I saw this like.
So when you do these practices, you start doing meditation, yoga, energy healing, and stuff like that. This mental illness will come. It'll come on there at some point. They're going to hit you with mental illness, or they'll take you out. She kind of goes over that in a second.
Like a cloud or like a dark spot to the left of his face. And I just had this like weird feeling like it's a spirit and it's pretending to be God, and it's not actually God. And I didn't really believe in demons or anything. I thought, you know, I didn't really believe in good or bad or evil or not. And I just knew that something was wrong, and I didn't know what to do. I was just like, okay, there's an evil spirit on my boyfriend telling him to leave me. And then where do I go from there? And he left like that week. And I was so devastated. Like, I really felt like this was the man for me. Like, this was my life partner. And I was just so in shock and desperate. And in my desperation, I just started texting my friends and just saying, hey, I know this sounds weird, but I think I saw like a spirit that took my boyfriend away, and I don't know what to do about it. He like moved out, and I don't feel right about it. I ended up talking to a friend of mine who was in pranic healing with me for 9 years. And we were like partners in that. What I didn't know is.
It's interesting too, because New Agers don't talk about spirits because the demons that have them don't want to be exposed. So in pranic healing, they don't tell you that demons are real or anything. That's what happened to me. They started manifesting in my body. I didn't even know they were real. So this is kind of crazy how this unfolds.
In the 2 years we hadn't seen each other, that she had been going to Church of Glad Tidings. And when this came up, I was like, hey, Kathy, like, help me. What do I do? And she's like, well, I happen to know some exorcists. And I was like, really? Like, there's people like that? Like, she's like, yeah. She's like, they've got a wild story. You should check it out. And I'm like, huh. And I watched this video about Pastor Dave Bryan from the Church of Glad Tidings and his spiritual warfare with the founder of the Church of Satan. And I was like, wow, if these guys know how to deal with this kind of weird stuff, man, they'll probably help me. And I was like really hesitant to go into a church. Like I would go into churches and pray, but like to officially go to a church, especially a Christian church, I was like, whoa. But I was desperate. And I just was like, I trusted my friend Kathy. You know, she'd been my spiritual partner for many years. We'd done all the courses together. We did all meditations together. And I ended up going to Church of Glad Tidings. And I think on my first visit, there was someone presenting. His name was Jess Parker. And what I didn't know at the time is that he was head of the deliverance team for Church of Glad Tidings. And his sermon was just about prayer languages, which I found very intriguing. I was like, and he was talking about prayer languages or speaking in tongues. It's like this celestial language that connects you to heaven. And I'm like, well, that sounds great. You know, like I like the idea.
One thing too is that if I didn't get the gift of tongues when I was going through the warfare that I was going through, I don't know that I would have made it through there. So it's interesting that the Lord, I mean, spoiler alert, she gets her prayer language, but it's interesting that the Lord, you know, has her get her prayer language first before she starts going through this deliverance and all that stuff. Interesting.
Idea of that, like opening up a heavenly realm with a prayer language. This sounds cool. Like I could dig this. You know, I'm not like into the whole Christianity thing, but this sounds pretty interesting. And at the end, he did an altar call, and he said, if there's anyone here who hasn't received their gift of speaking in tongues, please come to the front. And I didn't think about it. It was like my body stood up and walked up to the front, and I was like, well, what am I doing? I got up there like, what is going on? And I just sat there, and he's going down the line and laying hands on people. And sure enough, they're like bursting out speaking in tongues. And I'm like, you know, like I doubt anything is going to happen for me. But sure enough, he put his hand on his shoulder, and all of a sudden it was like all these tongues started coming out. And I was like, okay. And I didn't really know what to think. And I was like, questioning it, like, did I make it up? I'm like, I don't really know. So that was my first experience, which was really positive. And a week later, I decided to go to a different class at the Church of Glad Tidings, and it was called it was a prophetic class to teach you about prophecy and visions and things like that with the Spirit of God. And I thought, well, that'd be interesting to learn how to work with God and in my visions and dreams. So I was like, I'll check it out. And I went up to the teacher afterwards, and I said, I was still in this desperate, like, seeking of like trying to find help for my estranged partner. And I was like, will you pray for Gabriel, my estranged partner? And he looked at me and he just said, well, have you ever prayed in tongues? And I had tried it last week, but then I kind of got like discouraged, and I was like, oh yeah, once, kind of. And he looked at me straight. He's like, I'm not going to pray for you, but what I want you to do is I want you to go home and I want you to pray in tongues for 3 hours. And I was like, for real? Like, and I was like, okay. He's like, pray for this man. And I was like, okay. And so it was interesting because the next day was a very auspicious day for the arhatic yoga and pranic healing community, which I was a deeply part of on WESEC. It's like people fast for a week and they pray, and it's a day where we receive an impartation of spiritual energy for the year and our projects and our healings and all that stuff. And I was planning to do that. And so I had signed into the meeting, the Zoom meeting, and then I remembered the tongues thing, and I was like, oh, I'm just going to start praying. And I just got convicted to turn off that thing that I'd been a part of for years. It was almost sacrilegious to like, but I turned it off and I just started praying in tongues. And it sounded like really clunky and weird. And like, I was like, wow, this is stupid. But like 20 minutes in, something shifted. And it was like something took over, and it was like, what is happening? And it was like, all of a sudden, this intense like presence, pressure, like piercing light just from above just started to descend. And it was like my whole body started shaking, and I was sweating, and my hands were shaking, and I was still praying in tongues or whatever. But it was like my body, the weight of the glory of God filled the room, and my face, I just put it on the ground. Like I couldn't even lift my head. And I was like almost weeping, and I was just in shock. And I just knew at that very moment that it was the Spirit of God, and that I was encountering God for the first time in my entire life. And it was this, like I mentioned earlier, it was like this series of revelatory rapid insights. And it was like I was unplugged from the matrix of lies, and I was plugged into the Holy Spirit. And it was like this revelation. And in that, I mean, it probably was only seconds in the real world time and earth time, but man, it was like hours went by almost. And it was like I was just receiving these insights about my life. And it wasn't like I was even really being taught, or there was even words. It was just like this understanding. And it's like God showed me that my life was out of alignment with the laws and principles he set to govern this realm. In fact, he said something to me that was totally shocking. He said, I was a wanted felon in the spirit world for all the spiritual laws I had been breaking. And I was just in so much shock and just like, wow, I thought I was a spiritual person, and that I dedicated my life to being a good person and doing good things. And like, it was like this transmission. And I just knew that I had to follow him, and that I wanted that. For the first time in my life, I was just encountering the real God. And so, all this stuff that had happened with Gabriel and my relationship had led me to ask a question a week prior to that encounter, which was, who's God? As my world was falling apart and my partner was leaving, I was breaking in this humility that I had never had before. And I was just like, well, does Gabriel have a different God? Do I have a different God? And is there one God? And I had made this wager, which I don't recommend. It's just what happened, just what came out of me in my desperation. But I told God, when I was screaming and crying about everything, that if you show me who you are, God, I will give my life to you and everything in it. And that response came a week later in that encounter with the Holy Spirit, and things just started dominoing after that.
I feel like I want the story to continue. I think there's more to it. So I want to know, what was the domino effect that happened after that point?
So after I had that encounter, the next day I woke up in bed in the morning, and I had scheduled that day a kind of new age gathering. It was called breathing, a night of breathing. And we were doing this kind of type of breathing that, I felt like people had encountered God for the first time through this. And I thought, this is what I need to do. But I very distinctly felt, and I don't know if I heard it as a voice or if it was just an impression, but it must have been some sort of voice, because it was very clear instructions. And it was like, I want you to cancel your event, and I want you to go to this event at Church of Glad Tidings instead, called Show Me Your Glory. And I was like, it was a big deal. I was financially invested in this event. I had all these people counting on me for their spiritual experience that night. I was a well-known in the New Age community as a spiritual leader. And I was like going through this kind of spiritual crisis. And
one thing too, once the Holy Spirit comes in, he starts to convict, right? And everybody thinks, well, you got pulled out of something that you knew was demonic. Well, it takes you a little bit to process everything. A lot of times you don't know everything that was going on, or how much you were deceived. All that stuff just comes. I remember it took me a little bit to actually get rid of all my occult books. It took me a little bit to really know the depths of Satan that I was into with that. I mean, all my friends were in pranic healing, all of that stuff. So it's not just a snap of the fingers and everything. So she's getting that conviction. I thought that was great.
I just made the decision to let it all go. And I canceled the event. I called my partner who I was involved. I was like, I can't go, and I can't tell you why. didn't want to talk about what I was going through. I just knew that something was changing and I needed to listen, because when I had that encounter, I wanted more. I just couldn't get enough of it. I was like, I have to know this presence. It is so powerful and it is so beautiful. And I just feel so right in it. And it's so holy and it just feels so good. Like I need more. And so I did it. And I just canceled everything and I walked away from it and I got in my car and I drove to Church of Glad Tidings and decided to go to this conference called Show Me Your Glory. And my whole thing there was like, all right, God, show me your glory. I wanted to see more. I was like, let's do this. I'm in. This is awesome. And I'll never forget when I walked in to that sanctuary for the first time. And I had this bag on my shoulder, talk about supernatural. And it was this rope purse. And it was this purse that I wore for 1 year for only one occasion. And it was to go to this class with this spiritual teacher that my husband was following, who was my boyfriend at the time. And it was kind of like a cult. And there was things going on there that was like, something ain't right. So there's all this kind of, energy in the bag from that experience. And when I was looking for a book bag to go to this conference, I just randomly grabbed this, like, oh, this will work. And I hadn't used it since that time that I was going to the cult class, the spiritual cult class. And I never forget, I went through the front doors, but when I crossed the threshold into the sanctuary of the church for the first time, I had this bag on my shoulder. Mind you, it's a rope bag. And my right foot slid over the threshold of the church. And the minute it did, I'm only 1 foot in at this point, the handle of the bag shredded and popped off like this. And I was like, what? And I looked. And as I did, I took another step in the sanctuary and the second rope on the bag shredded.
Wow.
And the whole bag dropped to the ground. And I just stood there with my jaw open. I was like, whoa. And I picked it up off the floor and carried it. And I was like, man, I'm in the right place. Cause I had that memory of like this teacher and I was like, oh, it's like, it like pulled the bad energy out. I didn't have a lot of context for what was going on, but it's like, the glory of God hit that bag and whatever was stored in it left. It could not enter into that sanctuary of God. It was awesome. I was like, I'm in the right place. Mind you, I was still seeking help for my estranged partner at this point. I was like, all right, there is power here. I'm into this. And I had a very, very interesting day. It's like everything that people were saying, I don't know that I heard the words. Like, I'm a person who kind of lives in the subtle realm in general. Like I live a lot underneath the surface and in the spiritual reality and kind of undercurrents of reality rather than what's right on the surface. And so I was just kind of in this euphoric state of just feeling God and this presence there that was so palatable and I could feel just this power and presence like I'd never really felt before in that way. And I just knew that I needed to be there. And that somehow, even though I didn't agree with everything everybody was saying and preaching about Christianity and this and that, I felt a call, like a stir in me. And I was like, this is it. There's something here for me. And it was really interesting because the day before when I had been praying and I had that encounter.
This is also why it's important to have moving of the spirit at your church. Somebody coming out of a new age, they're going to need that. They're not going to be able to go sit into a dry church. I know that's hard to hear, but they need a place where the moving of the spirit's going on, where the gifts are in operation, deliverance is happening, things like this, to be able to come out of this type of stuff.
After the spirit left, my body had started convulsing in all these weird ways. And I had remembered a conversation that I had had with someone at the church when I first went. And they had said, the power of Jesus is more powerful than anything else. And I don't know what caused me to do this, but when I had this, like, it was like my neck was twisting by itself. It was like, what is going on? I just spoke the name of Jesus just for the heck of it, just to see. And sure enough, it was like whatever was twisting my neck responded like a jerk. And I was like, okay, this is too weird. I'm just going to put this in a compartment and not think about it. But when I went in that sanctuary that day, I knew that something wasn't right, that maybe my life wasn't what it seemed. And it was the first time in my life that I was broken and humble enough to really want to know the truth and to get outside of my certainty and my assumptions and the conclusions I've drawn about God and spirituality and how everything works, and be actually open to knowing what and who God is and what it meant for my life. And so at the end of that first day, they did a deliverance prayer. And basically they said, after you say this prayer, if you jerk or cough or move or you feel tightness, come to the front. We want to pray over you. And I started saying the prayer, and sure enough, my neck is jerking around. There's weird stuff going on. I'm coughing. The pastor's wife looks at me. I'm like, oh, I just know something ain't right here. Like, oh, I don't want to know, but I need to know. And so I went up to the altar, just like almost like this shuffling, like slow motion walk to the altar. And all I remember is there was this point inside of my spirit, and I just dropped one knee. And the moment my knee dropped in submission, saying, okay, God, I'm ready and I want to do this, it was like my body supernaturally like flew backwards, and a scream came out of my mouth. Mind you, I didn't scream, but something inside of me screamed, like bloody murder scream. And my body was like thrashing around, and I had no idea. Like, I kind of knew, like, okay, there's something inside of me, and it is reacting to the presence of God in this place, in the deliverance prayer I just said. And it was like I was thrown into like a horror movie or something, and there was this spirit fighting for a spot in my body. Meanwhile, all these people are praying to get it out. And at some point this wild scene, the pastor had some women take me back in a back room to pray for me, so as not to terrify the church with the screaming coming out of my body. That wasn't me, but it was my voice, which was really weird. And they took me in this back room, and they just started saying these things and praying. And they were like, oh, yoga spirit. And I was like, yoga spirit? What do you mean? What's a yoga spirit? And then my body would writhe around. And I'm like, a yoga spirit's in here? What in the world? And they said Kundalini spirit. And it was like, I was like, I was so confused. Like, Kundalini was divine energy, and now there's this spirit like moving my body around. This is so creepy. I was horrified. I was like, this is crazy. And they're like, you have to renounce it. I'm like, no problem. I renounce it. I was like, get it out. And, you know, they asked me if I had any tattoos, and I had the Eye of Horus on my chest and my heart gate. And man, they're like, show it to us. And I was like, okay. And man, they took this like anointing oil, and they like put their finger on it, and it was like, so creepy, man. I was like, just in shock. I was like, how is it that my whole life I've been this spiritual person taking a spiritual path, and come to find out it's a bunch of freaking demons? Like, what? I mean, talk about just the emotional roller coaster that was. And I had no idea what I was up against. It was it was just like the beginning. That night was the beginning. And that night I drove home, and I was like happy. I was like, oh, cool, you know? And I went home, and it was like a serious horror movie. Like, I was watching these two cats, and I walk in and the light wasn't on, and I just hear growling in the dark, and it was like, and I was like, oh, okay, this is too much. Not okay with this. And the cats start fighting each other. And I'm like, what is going on? It's like supernatural. I just run into my room and I shut the door and I was like, I have to make this go away. I have to make this go away. And like when I woke up in the morning, I felt like death. It was like the worst feeling of my life. It was so dark. And like, I kid you not, this was like a horror movie. I walked out and there was supernatural manifestations of like bugs and weird stuff I've never seen. It was
I've
like
seen the same
all
things that were
hell had
crawling
been
on my
loosed
body.
against me, and I
Same
was
thing.
thrown in the forefront of a spiritual battle I had no idea how to deal with. And I was terrified. And I literally, like, my heart was pounding, like, it was the worst anxiety. I literally felt like I was going to die that moment. Like, I took another step. I mean, I couldn't eat, like, I couldn't work. It was so hard. And it was like just darkness. And I was like, what is going on? And I remembered the night before there was this woman and she come up to me, and thank God she's my best friend now, but she's like, I saw what you went through and I'm happy for you, but I want you to know that sometimes this is a process. And can I give you my number? And I was like, sure. Okay. What?
That's important. That lady came up to her and told her sometimes this is a process. Remember, this lady's never been through deliverance. She doesn't know what deliverance is. Somebody coming up and speaking that type of truth to her, and everybody thinks, oh, it should just be all done in one deliverance session. Everything's out. No, what I opened up was entities that took me a long time to get them out. Took her a long time to get these things out. And this lady spoke some truth to her and reached out to her and said, hey, call me. Um, I don't know that she, might not have been able to get through it too without this lady, that helped her out. So don't be afraid to take people under your wing, and help them out. At least encourage them, tell them to pray with them, stuff like that. She was going through spiritual battles that most people wouldn't even dream of.
Whatever, I had no idea. And man, when just that moment, like I thought I couldn't take any more, death was just going to take my body. I was going to die there and I didn't know how or what. I just called her and I was like, I don't know what to say. Cause I felt like if I told her the truth that she'd probably call a psychiatrist and get me locked up. I don't know. I was like, this is too weird. Like I'm being like attacked by dark spirits and there's weird bugs everywhere. And I was like so confused. And she's like, oh, yeah, that's okay. I'm like, what do you mean? She's like, oh, that can happen. And can I pray for you? And I was like, yeah, sure. And she prayed and it was like so weird. Everything just started to dissipate. And like all the haunting, the darkness, the distorted perception, the bugs, everything cleared. And my life was like normal again. I was like, what is going on? I felt like I was losing my mind. I was like, I just don't even know what to make of this. And I didn't have anyone I could talk to about it. Like, oh yeah, I just thought I'd check out Jesus. And now I'm being haunted by a swarm of demons and they're putting death in my house. And I feel like I'm going to actually physically die. They're going to kill me. And like, it was just so weird. And then like 10 minutes later, after I got off the phone, I was like, oh my gosh, I feel so much better. It started creeping in again. And I remember sitting in my office chair and I was just paralyzed with fear. And I was like, it's like, I'd kicked these things out and they wanted back in. They were like stalking me. They wanted their territory, which was my soul territory that I didn't realize I'd given to them. They wanted back in. Even if they had to kill me, I don't know. It was wild. And I just remember I could feel this entity standing behind me. And it was like cold and like, I felt paralyzed. Like I couldn't move. And I was like, Jesus, help. And like all of a sudden it was like this angel came and stand and everything left. And I felt this angelic presence behind me. And it was like, I felt okay. And it was like everything stopped, the spinning, the craziness, the distorted perception, vision, the shaking, the fear, just gone in an instant. And then I really felt like I was losing my mind, because here I was oscillating between these extremes. And I was like, this whole reality that I didn't have any framework for. I didn't even really believe in good and evil in a kind of biblical Christian sense. And yeah, that was the beginning of a very intense 6-month battle for my life and for my body. And some of the warfare was very intense, especially when I was trying to get free from the Kundalini spirit and Lord Shiva.
All right, we'll stop there. Well, that's an amazing story. Please listen to this. I'll link the original video in the description. But very, very similar stuff. I went through these battles too. I had opened myself up to Shiva. I'd opened myself up to all these same entities, the Kundalini spirit. I was doing Kundalini yoga, Kundalini meditation on the daily. So the more stuff you open yourself up to, the more this battle is going to be intense. The Lord Jesus will give you victory. Um, but there was so many nuggets in here. I just thought I had to share all this with you. And like I said, I was excited to see another person that was deeply entrenched into this cult that I was in called Pranic Healing, and the Lord saved her out of this. So um, praise the Lord for that. If you want to see more reaction type content like this, just leave some comments in the comments below, and please like the video and consider subscribing. Thanks for watching.